And check back in with our timeline. Okay? So we've talked about the Cambrian explosion of life. We've talked about the Great Ordovician biodiversification event. We have talked about the rise of the early fishes that didn't have jaws, then the fishes that evolved to have jaws, eventually to have bones. Now we're getting into the very first land-dwelling animals, the amphibians, and this is occurring during the Devonian about 400 million years ago. Okay. Now, the first four-legged vertebrates to come ashore were amphibians. And the fossil record for these amphibians starts with a group of fish called Ichthyostegits. These fish retained a lot of features from their fish ancestors. They had a tail fin, they had bony gill covers, their vertebrate was shaped like a fish vertebra. However, they also started to have features that looked like land-dwelling animals. Notice that it looks like it can walk on land, right? It's got four limbs that are face downward, like a creature that would walk on land. So the evolutionary advance from fish that lived in the water to tetrapods that had four limbs and could walk on land was a huge biological achievement. However, there was one that was perhaps even more important, and this was the advent of amniotes. Right? This is what allowed animals to no longer be tied to the water. Remember, amphibians are tied to the water because they have to lay their eggs in the water, and the young have to live in the water before developing into their adult form, like tadpoles developing into frogs. Amniotes finally allowed animals to no longer be tied to the water because the eggs had a hard outer shell, so they wouldn't dry out. And when the new babies were born, they were prepared to live on land. They didn't have to live in the water. By the late Carboniferous, amniotes had diverged into two different groups, the reptiles and the synapsids. Synapsids are a group of animals that include mammals and every animal that's more closely related to mammals than the other groups of the amniotes, like reptiles and birds, right? So synapsids, mammals and mammal-like reptiles. One of the synapsids we call therapsids, or a group of synapsids we call therapsids, and these were small, moderate-sized animals that had several mammalian skeletal traits, right? So you can see how we've gone from fish to amphibians to reptiles and synapsids. Synapsids look a lot like reptiles, but they're not. Those evolved into therapsids, eventually into mammals. Now, remember, these animals are mammal-like reptilians. They might look like dinosaurs. They are not dinosaurs. Dinosaurs haven't evolved yet. They might look like mammals. They're not mammals. They're just mammal-like. Okay, they're kind of that in between. Okay, once again, let's check back in our timeline. We have made it all the way to the end of the Paleozoic for the animals. Next up, we're going to look at the plants.